There's an open secret in the airline industry keeping your fares high. And if you look closely, you can see it right behind me. Join me on this flight, and you'll understand why airline signs at the gates you've seen across the country are not just innocent branding. They're actually key to how the four biggest airlines keep you paying more for a steadily deteriorating flying experience.
We'll dive into the heart of the industry to expose how the largest airlines monopolize airport infrastructure, shutting out competition.
Even if the gates are empty.
But I'll also take you to Missoula, Montana, where a brand new terminal shows that it doesn't have to be this way. We can have really nice airports and lower prices.
Let's get ready for takeoff.
To understand why we're all paying too much to fly, you have to understand how radically the industry has changed over the past decades.
For 40 years, from 1938 to 1978, the airlines in the United States were regulated by the federal government, much in the same way that other utilities are regulated.
That's Bill McGee. He's worked in aviation for decades.
This is the really shocking part. Imagine this. Fares actually made sense then. They were based on cost. What a concept. We haven't seen that in 46 years.
For more than 50 years, aviation was a very stable industry. But in 1978, President Jimmy Carter signed the Airline Deregulation Act, giving airlines control over routes and fares.
What we've seen since then is constant disarray. We see dozens and dozens of airlines in the last 40 years that have either shut down, filed for bankruptcy, reorganized, or we've seen dozens and dozens of mergers and acquisitions. So what we have now in 2024, this is not hyperbolic, is the most concentrated and consolidated industry that we've ever seen. We have 12 scheduled passenger airlines in the United States right now. That may seem like a lot, but for context, in the mid-1980s, we had more than 75. We have not had so few airlines in the United States since before World War I, since the infancy of the industry in 1914.
Look at this. There's only like 4, 5, maybe 6 airlines flying out of this airport. There are more flavors of Coca-Cola than there are airlines to fly from.
The big 4 airlines in the United States, that's American, Delta, Southwest, and United, they control 80% of the market.
That outsized market power directly affects the price you pay for a ticket.
And I think it's really one of the most underreported airline stories of the 21st century. The big guys stopped competing with each other head-to-head on price around the turn of the century, around 2001, 2002.
Today, if your options on a given route are only Delta, United, and American, you're guaranteed to pay more. The only way that changes is if a low-cost carrier enters that market.
Even if you never fly Spirit Airlines or Frontier or Allegiant or Breeze or Velo, if you never once get on one of their planes, you benefit from their presence if you're flying on a route in which they fly. When an ultra-low-cost carrier enters a market, fares on average go down about 21%, in some cases even more. It's just impossible to overstate just how critical the role of the low-cost carriers are.
There's just one problem. Low-cost carriers are often being shut out of the mere opportunity to compete. You can see it for yourself in many airports across the country. Next time you fly, take a look at the airline signage at your gate and ask yourself, is it permanent?
If you're at a major airport in Europe, you still have dominant carriers, of course. Air France is going to be the biggest airline in Paris, but what you will see is that the airports are designed in such a way that there is common usage. When you're told that your flight is at gate 17 and it's an Air France flight, there's no Air France logo bolted into the wall in metal. There's no signage that's just constantly telling you Air France, Air France, Air France. You will see an electronic boarding announcement.
Common usage allows airlines to share gates, bag rooms, computer systems, and other infrastructure required to run a flight. When that Air France flight takes off, the screen and gate can turn over and be used by a different airline.
We don't tend to use that model here in the United States. The big carriers fight against common usage. We allow the largest carriers to brand airports as their own. But it's a deeper problem than that. It's not just that Delta has its signs bolted into the walls in Atlanta and many other places. It's that they use that power and that size and scope of their operation to keep out others.
A recent analysis of gate use in major airports shows exactly how the largest airlines use their power to dominate the system.
In 2019, the major airlines had a set routine for how much time it took them to turn aircraft at a certain gate.
Turning an aircraft means getting a plane in and out again.
In simple terms, if a major carrier before COVID was operating 7 flights a day out of a gate at a given airport, well, after COVID, they may have been operating 4 flights a day. A sensible person would say, well, there's an opening there for 3 more flights, so let's have a lower cost carrier come in. Shockingly, in 2023, they went back and compared the numbers to 2019, and they saw that all throughout COVID, the big carriers continued to sit on those gates and other airport assets, right? They stretched out the times.
Not all of these gates are empty, but a lot of these flights don't take off for hours.
There is really, really strong evidence that the big airlines use the facilities that they bully airport authorities in many cases, to have access to. They use them to the detriment of competition and low-cost carriers, right? If you are a major airline, you do not want to see Spirit, Frontier, Allegiant, because you know the result. They will come in and offer lower fares.
But it doesn't have to be this way. I traveled to one airport doing things differently. That could be a sign of the future.
This is the nicest airport I've ever been in.
Airports are essentially always under construction, but this airport in Missoula, Montana, is undergoing a massive 3-part expansion, in large part thanks to federal funding.
Phase 1 of Missoula's terminal expansion, where I'm standing right now, was partly funded by the American Rescue Plan, which the Biden-Harris administration passed in 2021. It's very clean, it's very new, it's very shiny, but it also has character. It's got all this nice, cedar wood. My dad's gonna get mad, he's a carpenter, that's probably not the kind of wood. It looks like cedar to me, but it looks like a cabin.
I talked to the airport managers Tim Damrow and Brian Elstad, who told me it isn't cedar.
But now that you say pine,
it's pine, yeah.
It has more of the swirlies.
But they also revealed crucial details about the airport's renovation that are actually creating competition and lowering fares.
One unique thing that we did is we tried to leave space in between all of our agencies here. So if an airline needs to grow or expand, there's open ticket counters next to them. And then again, there's always room for a new entrant as well. We use what's called the common use system. So that allows airlines to be able to use any gate at the airport.
You won't see a Delta or United sign bolted to the wall here in Missoula. The airport also set up its baggage service in a unique way.
This is our baggage makeup carousel.
And usually airlines, they have their own staff doing this. Like
Yeah.
it could be United Air baggage people, Delta baggage people,
Yep.
and they're separate.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. We actually operate our own ground handling department as well. So the airport, we provide service for American, Allegiant, Frontier, and Sun Country.
And to have that as an option probably makes it easier to bring in newer airlines.
Nailed it right on the head.
Just this year, several low-cost airlines added new flights to Missoula.
So Sun Country started this summer, Frontier returned to us. When you get those 2 carriers, then other airlines try to keep their market share. So United more than doubled their service into Missoula this summer. If you go out and buy a ticket anecdotally, you can see our prices are way, way down. We're hearing that in the community, that they appreciate the cost of airfare has gone down due to competition this summer.
The next 2 phases of Missoula's airport expansion, which are under construction now, are funded in part by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which the Biden-Harris administration also passed in 2021.
So this is our last piece of construction. This is phase 3. So the last grant we received through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law really allowed us to fund this last chunk of the project.
The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law amounts to the single largest upgrade of America's transportation infrastructure since the 1950s, with $25 billion allocated to airports. And the law is helping break the airline stranglehold on airport infrastructure. When selecting projects for grant money, the Department of Transportation has been prioritizing ones that increase competition like Missoula's expansion. It's an approach that's in line with a slew of new protections for passengers that the Biden-Harris administration has enacted, such as banning hidden fees.
Healthy competition requires that as a consumer, you comparison shop, which means knowing the real price of a trip before and not after you buy.
I've been around airlines for 39 years now, since 1985, and I can tell you that the last 2 years or so, I think we've seen more positive developments than we've seen in all that time. The fact is, in the last 2 years or so, the Biden-Harris administration has stepped up and enacted a flurry of new passenger protections, new rules. Of course, the airline industry hates it.
Airlines for America, a lobbying group that only represents the largest airlines, has been lobbying against and publicly fighting these new passenger protections. The group and the carriers they represent have spent $20 million since early 2023 lobbying against rules requiring airlines to disclose hidden junk fees. They also attempted to kill the administration's new rule requiring airlines to issue automatic refunds for canceled flights.
And the big guys are out for their own best interests. And unfortunately, those interests are often anti-competitive, anti-consumer, and against the best interests of the country itself. So that is why some of us are saying it's time to look at new and sensible ways of regulating the industry.
Long term, with an industry this powerful, it will take even bolder action to make the airlines prioritize passengers over profits and increase competition to bring down prices. The Airport Gate Competition Act, introduced by Senators Elizabeth Warren and Josh Hawley, is one proposed piece of legislation to do that.
In very simple terms, it calls for at least 25% of gates and facilities to be common usage. But what it also does is it will limit the largest carrier from having more than 50% domination at a given airport. It may be one of the most significant things that can be done to crack this sort of stranglehold that the big guys have on airports. And if we can get more access, that in turn will help bring down fares and provide more choices for consumers. That word that we're always hearing about, but that we don't often see in the industry, competition.